Welcome to Nailing the Apex, everyone. I'm Tim Hauraney. Please head on over to Spotify, give us a 5-star rating and a follow. Same goes with Apple Podcasts. You can watch us on YouTube. You can follow me on social media at Tim Hauraney. Joining me is Adam Wylde. Adam, did you stay up to watch the Japanese Grand Prix live?
No, no. I have my daughter, and I know she'll be up at like 7 o'clock. So I got up. I tried to get up a little bit early, watch a little bit of it. And then I set her up with a bowl of Cheerios and some My Little Pony, and that's what I did. That's how I managed to watch it. But you know, thank goodness for F1 TV. It's honestly, is of all the major sports, F1 has the easiest viewing experience because you just pay the subscription, you watch when you can, because a lot of us are parents and we can't. And then the great thing is you just kind of stay off social media, because if I log into my social media, it would have blown the whole race for me. Which, by the way, did not turn out too badly for my boys in orange. Did it.
As soon as you popped on the screen, you have like your orange McLaren hat on. And I'm like, Adam's jacked up for the second and third place.
Listen, you know, when you go from, what did they finish in Jeddah? Like 17, 18, and the other two cars behind them were DNFs. Like,
it was bad.
This is amazing. This is what a turnaround in one season. Amazing.
Let's go to Red Bull first. We'll talk about them off the hop. Red Bull Racing winning their 6th Constructors title with Max Verstappen taking the win on Sunday in Japan. Adam, I mean, Verstappen absolutely smashed everyone this weekend in practice, especially in qualifying, and then also in the race as well. I mean, it was just a complete weekend from him and from the team, but I think like it's a statement win, right? Because of what had happened in Singapore. I mean, just, you knew that he like coming into this weekend, he was going to be uber focused and he was just going to dominate everybody.
Absolutely. I think, you know, there was that mini controversy about something with the flexi floors that F1 had flagged, and is this going to slow down Red Bull? And I have to be honest, I was like, man, what if it does? Like, that'd be kind of cool to see just a fight to the finish. But Max was his usual self today, and it's funny, you know, every time he wins, people complain about it being boring. First off, if that's the way you look at Formula One, you're looking at it the wrong way. It's not just about who wins; it's about how everybody places. Yeah. It is obviously majority about who wins, but still, beyond that, I think. I think that greatness is repetitively boring. Like, when you're in the midst of greatness, when you're watching it happen, it can be predictable because it's great. Because they're so good that you expect them to win. Like, you look there at Ayrton Senna. I'm sure in his day when he was winning all those races, especially that one race that year where, you know, McLaren won every race, I think, except for one.
Yeah, 88.
Yeah, 88. I'm sure people were complaining about it. I'm sure they were saying, this is boring. I can't believe this. The sport's got a real problem. You know, a decade later when Michael Schumacher and Ferrari are winning everything all the time, same thing. But I got to say, like, you know, we're going to look back on this year with Max Verstappen and Red Bull and go, this is one of the greatest seasons anyone's ever put together. And we're very lucky to be watching it.
Yeah, I agree. Verstappen, you had mentioned the technical directive. So Verstappen was asked about that. Post qualifying, he said, quote, we had a bad weekend in Singapore. Of course, then people start talking about that it's all because of the technical directives. I think they can go suck on an egg. He said, I was just very fired up to have a good weekend here and make sure that we are strong.
Mm-hmm. And they were.
Yeah,
one of them was.
Yeah, Sergio obviously struggling mightily this weekend. We'll get to that in a minute. I just want to talk about the start of this race because it was pretty funny. I mean, Verstappen and both Piastri pull up to their grid boxes and they both have their cars like pointing at each other.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I had like glimpses of like Senna Prost in 1990, I believe it was, into turn one. And that's actually something that Lando had said post qualifying, was that the only way that, you know, they were going to come away with a win or get into the lead is if Piastri pulled off a Senna Prost turn one incident.
Almost, it almost looked like Lando had it there. Even if he'd held it for a lap, it would have been cool.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, it would have been like the British Grand Prix start all over again, right? I mean, I think one of the things that, Verstappen did so well off that start was just obviously being pretty aggressive with Piastri, taking him to the grass kind of thing, and then holding the line once he got into turn one and turn two. And for Lando, I mean, just not enough grip there for him to go around the outside like that. But at the end of the day, I mean, he gave it a shot. Mm-hmm. I think like one of the interesting things with this whole win, and when we look at like Verstappen's like body of work for this entire weekend, he didn't make one single mistake all weekend. He didn't make one mistake in the race. I mean, sometimes we do kind of see that. Canada, that comes to mind. Spa also comes to mind. And there are a few others as well. This one, Adam, he was ultra precise with everything, even in qualifying. Like I've never seen a qualifying lap at Suzuka, especially sector one, that impressive, like ever. It was, I don't know if you got to watch qualifying.
100%. Every week, every GP I'm watching.
His pole lap, man, was absolutely incredible. Like,
well, and to put it, was it 128 in the 128s or something?
Yeah, 128.8.
Like that, I mean, it's got to be close to the theoretical best, right? Like there's no way. Right on, right? Yeah. So, that's the thing. The guy's walking on water. He just has so much confidence in that car, and he should. It's a really well-built car. But you can see what happens when a very good driver takes a car like that versus him.
Yeah. Oh, and, absolutely.
Sergio's a very good driver. I think the unfortunate part of how good Max is how bad Sergio is somehow being portrayed to be. Sergio's a normal F1 driver, which is, he's still among the probably 10 best in the world, 15 best in the world. I mean, clearly 20 best, but you know what I'm saying? Like if you were to rank them, they all drove a car that fit their specifications. I think Sergio's in the top 10 every time. But at the end of the day, Max is just on a different plane. This is greatness. And that lap was crazy because, it looked like he might be under pressure by a couple of the McLarens, and obviously not even a little bit,
I mean, Sergio did make mention after the quali that, what Max was doing and the lap that he had put together was special. Sergio was 8/10 off, I believe it was in qualifying. And then, getting into the race for him, like just a real tough weekend for him. Picked up that 5-second penalty for his collision with Haas. He also had the collision off the start. The team retired the car, but then sent him back out later, to serve that penalty, so they didn't carry it over to Qatar. So what would have happened is if they didn't serve the penalty there, they would have got a grid penalty in Qatar. Just a horrible weekend for Sergio all around. I mean, off the pace, literally, doing, running into other drivers. I mean, the move on Magnussen, I mean, the stuff at the start of the race, look, I get that. I mean,
that happens.
Stuff happens. But the move on Magnussen just was not on, Adam. Like, it just, I don't know what he was thinking in that moment. Like, there's no way he was making that pass happen.
Well, no. And you're committing to something where the driving line's going to disappear, right? It doesn't matter how wide that Magnussen is. He's coming in deep. And all he would have really had to do is, I was thinking, looking at that, I mean, he could have head faked him a little bit, got a little close, and got Magnussen to overcommit to trying to cut him off, and then gone around him the other way. And I think it speaks to Tim, and you always kind of talk about this with me when we're talking about driving off of offline and not on the air, is confidence. And I feel bad for Sergio because he had such a great start. He should be confident. He does have the talent, but the confidence just does not seem to be there. And when you're not confident and you're taking risks, you usually take the wrong ones.
Yeah, 100%. I think like you're just trying, like for Sergio, just kind of feels like and looks like trying too hard.
Yeah. Yes.
One of the things that like we're with motorsports is that, the harder you try, like forcing things, especially with the car, the slower you end up going. That always is the way. So it's called overdriving. So when you start overdriving the race car, you always go slower. You never go faster. And it just looks like that frustration of overdriving, because every driver has moments of that, because when you're in the car, you're just so much adrenaline. There's so much aggression that like it just happens. And so I think for Sergio, that definitely a tough week. I mean, there's people online saying like, well, this is the last race for Sergio Perez in a Red Bull. I mean, it's not the last race for Sergio Perez in a Red Bull. Like, relax. Like,
no.
I mean, I think like at the end of the day, that's why they signed both Yuki Tsunoda and Daniel Ricciardo for 2024 in that AlphaTauri seat. And they've also got Liam Lawson now, who's going to be that reserve driver, test driver for both teams, Red Bull and AlphaTauri. Just kind of keeps that, it keeps everybody sort of honest, right, Adam? Like,
well, the competition's crazy. It strikes me, Tim, considering that Liam Lawson had points last race, and just outside of the points today, and just outside of the points his first race. He's been really, really solid. It looks like Red Bull, both teams are built for somebody to move. Mm-hmm. You know, and it's like they did it that way on purpose. Something's got to give. So who's it going to be? And I wonder, you know, with Yuki and Daniel at you know, Hugo Boss or Adidas or whatever the AlphaTauri brand is going to become after this, I kind of wonder about Sergio and Liam. Like, if this happens, let's say the last 5 races that Sergio Perez has had happens to start next year. You start in Melbourne, it's a DNF, and then, you know, Jeddah, it's, you know, a 7th place or something like that, or the qualifying isn't there, taking too many penalties. His pit stops have been great. We know that. He's been, you know, probably him and Lando have been 2 of the best. I wonder if you start to hear the rumors about Liam Lawson, because I think Yuki's great where he is. As soon as the car gets picked up, I think you're going to see Yuki Tsunoda full power, and he's going to be great. We know that Daniel Ricciardo can put in crazy laps on that Red Bull car already, the one that Max is driving, and that's set up for Max. I kind of wonder if I wonder if they move Daniel up to the big team, or they keep him at the other team because he's marketing dollars, and Liam Lawson's the guy that can make the switch. I don't know what they would do, but I think if this sort of trajectory continues, it's a very good chance next year their title could be under threat in the first, you know, 4 or 5 races, and they're going to have to make a call.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think like if this continues into next season for Sergio, and then you've got McLaren and Mercedes and Ferrari and potentially Aston Martin breathing down the necks of Red Bull next season, which is possible that could happen. I mean, for those out there that's saying that there's no way, I mean, I tend to disagree, and I disagree strongly. You just take a look at what McLaren's done this season. It's never seen anything like it before, ever. That means you're going to need a strong number 2 at Red Bull Racing. And if Sergio can't figure it out and just sort of get it together and get that confidence with the car, then yeah, you're Red Bull Racing. You have to look at making the best decision for the team, for your number 1 driver. I mean, because that's the way Red Bull runs, right, Adam? I mean, they have a number 1 and they have a number 2. It's just the way it is, right? And I think that's probably one of the smarter ways to go when you're running a Formula One team, and especially when you have a talent like a Max Verstappen. But when you look at what Lawson has done over these past few races, it's extremely remarkable. He's right on pace, like with Yuki Tsunoda. He's been off doing Super Formula. It's a totally different car. Like, he's barely been in this AlphaTauri. First time he stepped into it was at the Dutch Grand Prix. It's not an easy thing to do, to just get into an F1 car or any type of Formula car and make it go fast right away. It takes time to like learn it, understand it. What is it like? What doesn't it like? And that takes time, not 10 laps in a practice session and then you're getting thrown into a wet quali or whatever. I mean,
and not a great car.
No. And so I just think for Red Bull, they finally have a direction for their driver pipeline, where if we go back to like 2020, 2021, you know, and they're chewing up drivers like it's nobody's business. Pierre Gasly comes in, gone, has a cup of coffee. Alex Albon comes in, has a cup of coffee. He's gone. And then they're like, well, we don't have any other drivers. We don't know who we're going to partner up with Max. And so the situation happens with Racing Point. where they want to bring in Sebastian Vettel. Perez loses that seat. And so Red Bull goes, taps him on the shoulder. Hey, come on over. But that's a driver that's not in the pipeline.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so now I think they've restructured it where they're starting to get back to that. Like they're starting to get back to bringing their drivers, their talent up again. And so it's a really smart move. And obviously Lawson's, not going to like it and it sucks. And like for him, he's definitely going to be pissed and he should be. But I think at the end of the day, that's going to keep him hungry, right?
Well, I think at the end of the day too, Tim, to echo that, not just hungry, I think he's racing next year. I think he's just going to race halfway through the year. I really do think that he's coming in next year at some point. And I wonder about, and again, it all goes back to Perez because unfortunately he's the man under fire. But I think, unfortunately, with Daniel's hand breaking, it's going to take him a couple weeks to get back into that car and get situated. So I don't have high, if he does make an appearance at Qatar, I don't have like high hopes. I'm not going to hinge his season on it, but his last 5 races of the year are going to be really important. Yeah. And his first 5 next year are going to be mega important because if he races well, the logical thing to do for Red Bull is to have him race with Max. If they figure out that Sergio's not their guy, that he can't cut it or whatever it is, having a veteran guy come in, knowing that he's not going to be a title favorite, but knowing he can push Max, he might win a couple races here. He knows the car, he knows the team, he's beloved, and hey, he's great marketing too. Could probably soften Max Verstappen's image, to be honest. I think all of those things feel like really good for Daniel. And I know that, there's a lot of Daniel haters on the internet because there's a lot of people that love Daniel. But Liam Lawson going head to head with Max Verstappen, we saw what it did to Gasly. Yeah, we saw what it did to, to Albon. Albon lasted a season and a half, I think, right? Like he was pretty good.
Yep.
But then now he's not even in the system, I don't think. And he's with Williams doing a great job. But I think at the end of the day, you want experience. Like Mark Webber and Sebastian Vettel are sort of the best sort of carbon copy of this. Mark Webber, if you read his book, truly believed he could win the championship, and he came pretty damn close. But Sebastian Vettel was the young, upstart, unbelievable talent driver. And the reason it worked is because after that 1 year where they were sort of neck and neck, Mark knew his place. And it didn't mean that he wasn't going to challenge him, and it didn't mean that he wasn't going to fight for everything that he got. But Mark Webber knew Mark Webber's pecking order on that team. It pissed him off. But what are you going to do? And I think Daniel would be a lot more comfortable with it because he'd probably just be happy to be there. What a change of fate if he ends up with the Red Bull big team. And
really the only driver at Red Bull who's ever really challenged him at the big team. I mean, yes. Carlos, not saying anything bad about Carlos Sainz. He did challenge Max at Toro Rosso when they were teammates, but the only driver to really challenge Max at Red Bull Racing was Daniel Ricciardo. That's just the way it is. I mean, I think like it's a smart move. I agree with you because I don't think you put Liam Lawson into the big team and just have Max, eat him up and spit him out. Like it's just not going to be good for the confidence, and you're not going to build your pipeline of drivers by doing that. You have to really just nurse the younger drivers along. And it's a tough car to drive. You can't ask them to go and jump in a car like that. I mean, the AlphaTauri is a little bit different, right? I mean, it's not they are sort of similar, but for the most part, you would be asking him to jump in a difficult car to drive. Sergio is a great driver. There's no question about it. I mean, he's struggling. It's not like Sergio doesn't know how to race or drive a race car or qualify a race car or manage tires or whatever. He's been doing this forever. Like, it's just a tough car to really wring its neck, and Max is able to do that. And so, I think it would probably be smarter to move Daniel up into the big team either next season or season after when Sergio's contract ends, and then you put Liam into that AlphaTauri situation.
And you look at the environment that Red Bull has, right? Like Oscar Piastri's come into McLaren. They've welcomed him in. He's had a really good pace that's gotten better and better and better each weekend. He's a rookie. He's now finishing on the podium. It's amazing. I wonder what Oscar Piastri would look like at Red Bull. And I wonder what kind of season or what kind of confidence he would have. Because McLaren is very clearly, we want you both to succeed. Red Bull, rightly, is like, we're going to put our support behind Max. That seems like the right thing to do here. And I just feel like, it would be hostile for anybody except for Daniel. Because, We know that there's politics there. The Verstappen team is not going to play mind games with Daniel Ricciardo. They like each other. Like it just seems like a perfect fit eventually. Do you think Sergio makes it through next year? Do you think they really care that they have a contract with Sergio through 24? Like they keep bringing it up, but it's like, I mean, they have so much money. Do they care about paying out a driver?
Yeah, I think so. I think they care to have Sergio there for sure. Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, it's not like, look, like if you look at the beginning of the season, you know, Sergio was right on pace with Max. Like he was on pace with him. He was beating him as well. But I mean, at the same time, the car starts to go away from him, and then the confidence starts to go down a hill, and then you get the snowball effect. And a lot of drivers go through it. It's not like he's the only one, but it's kind of like sometimes when you're not really understanding the car, you're having trouble getting to grips with a tough race car to drive. Sometimes you start chasing your own tail, and you overthink things, and you dig a little bit too deep, and then you start overdriving. And similar to the situations that we're seeing now, I think that, you know, Sergio can get back to challenging Max more regularly. Maybe not on the exact same pace as Verstappen, because honestly, he is in another league right now. Like he's just he's on another planet, man. Like you put anyone in that second seat, I don't know if they're keeping up with him. I really don't. Like,
yeah, I don't think so.
He really is on another level at this moment. But I think like Sergio has a reset in the offseason, comes back. Yeah, I think he could finish off that drive just nicely. The question I think is that, you know, do they bring him back after his contract ends? Because it is ending at the end of next season. It's kind of just like, well, what do they do in 2024? And that's where the question is of, do they bring Daniel Ricciardo back in, you know, or do they bring Liam Lawson or Yuki or someone like that back in? I think
if they're going to start to share more information between those two teams, which I think they should, you don't want. It's great that Red Bull's winning every race, but their sister team shouldn't be finishing dead last, and they're right now in dead last. It's just not acceptable. You can't have that. So, what are you going to do?
That's the thing, right? I mean, I think also with AlphaTauri for next season and whatever they're going to be rebranded as, that team is going to get moved closer to Red Bull, obviously. And then at the same time, I think that the AlphaTauri is going to look a lot similar to the RB19 next season. And I think they're going to take a lot of parts from that car as well and just build upon it. I think this is going to be a stronger team next season as well. I mean, you look at the start of the season for AlphaTauri. I mean, it was bad, man. It was really bad. And then they had a huge upgrade at the British Grand Prix. And then they started bringing more upgrades to the car. Then they had another round of pretty sizable upgrades in Singapore. And hearing from Yuki, it does seem like the upgrades are working. The car is better to drive. It's a little more forgiving than when Nick DeVries was in the car earlier in the season. And so I think for AlphaTauri, this is a team that's going to be a lot stronger next season. And so, yeah, I think you want to have that tandem of Yuki and Daniel Ricciardo. You're going to have the younger driver, and then you got that a little older driver. Yeah, you have that experience to bring that team along. And so, interesting situation with both of those teams, Adam. But
constantly juicy with Red Bull. Constantly.
Oh yeah, always, man. There's always something. McLaren, though. Man, they've been awesome. Like, unbelievable. I think, you know, it's funny hearing Lando Norris say at the end of the race, you know, quote, "We're coming for you, Red Bull." Like, we're coming for Red Bull, right? Like, I never thought I'd hear a team or a driver say that at the end of the race.
They're feeling it. They're feeling themselves. And listen, they might have like a full lap. Like Lewis was complaining, I think, and I understand why he's pissed, right? He's just signed his extension, and they're a full second behind Red Bull still. Like, he's like, I don't know how we're going to compete with them next year. And it's because there's a time limit for Lewis. For Lando and for Oscar, that time limit's so far down the road that they can afford to say, we'll wait you out. We'll be here in a couple of years, man. We'll still be coming for you. Like, and I think that, I don't know how much, you know, development you can get done over the course of the winter, Tim. Like, obviously we saw enormous jumps for, you know, Aston Martin this year. over the course of the winter. I think they were the most improved team. But you can see teams stagnate too. Like, Mercedes had to make massive changes after the first couple of races. Ferrari didn't get any better. I would argue that they were they were challenging Red Bull at the beginning of last season. Now they're kind of probably going to finish third. I wonder about what McLaren can do. Obviously you're going to figure out a lot in the next few races, but what can you do to close that gap over the course of the winter? Because you got to figure it out.
100%. I think what's interesting about all of it is that we have never seen a team make a jump this big inside of a season before. I've never seen. I've been involved in racing since I was 9 years old. I've been watching F1 since the 80s. I'm dating myself here, but at the same time,
I'm late 90s.
At the same time, I mean, dude, we have never seen this before. We've never really seen a team take this big of a jump within an actual season. And that's because of the regulation. That's because of the cost cap. But at the same time, that's also because of a great engineering strategy that Andrea Stella and his team have done. He's really just gone in there and just let this team work.
Yeah.
And he's really just believed in the talent that he has behind the scenes to get this project to where it is now. And you have to give him a lot of credit. He was thrown into this team at the last minute because of Andreas Seidel leaving to go to Alfa Romeo Sauber, which will soon become Audi, to run that program. And for Andreas Stella, he has done an incredible job of getting this team from literally at the back to now fighting at the front. And so when you look at that development rate, and it's massive, you have to then apply that to the winter. When in the wintertime, you have no racing going on, your sole focus is on one car. We're currently, before the summer, they were focusing on two cars. They had their 2024 car, which is in the wind tunnel, their new one at the factory, and then they had their 2023 car out in Cologne. And they're working on it out there. And then you look at trying to work on both projects at the same time and bring upgrades while you're fighting inside a championship, while you're trying to make your way up the constructor standings. They've done an incredible job, Adam. It just shows that you don't know what's going to happen in the off season, and you have no idea what's going to happen next year. That's why everybody
not to know too, right? I guess we hope,
I think for McLaren, one of the more interesting things with that team is that they've really figured out where all of their performance needs to come from. And they know how to adapt to it quickly. And they've figured out how to turn their weaknesses into strengths. You look at that car in slow speed corners and it sucked after the British Grand Prix. It was horrible. The car was fast as hell, long, high speed corners. It was incredible. But once you went to slower tracks, it wasn't as good. And then in Singapore, they bring that update that fixes that issue, but keeps the strength as well. And you look at what happens in Japan, it's all paid off, right? Yep. They've nailed everything. And I just think that it's so difficult to do that in Formula One. But at the same time, I would be worried about McLaren if I'm Red Bull. I 100% would be. And what Lando has said at the end of the race, I believe what he's saying. They are coming for Red Bull. The gap, even Lando makes mention of it post-race press conference, like the gap between the two of them. He thought it was going to be not as big. He thought it was going to be bigger. It was only 19 seconds. He thought it was going to be they were going to get lapped.
Well, this is the bar Red Bull has set too. Can you imagine? Just I feel real good about 15 seconds behind a guy. But you're right, Tim. I think that so I think Andrea Stella's done his job, right? He needed to come in and find out can I trust these engineers? Like remember the France toast?
At the beginning.
I don't even trust my engineers. Yeah. I was like, well, he's probably going to leave the team soon, and lo and behold. I think Andrea Stella can trust his engineers. I know that they have hired somebody away from Mercedes, I think, and somebody away from Red Bull too, joining them in the next couple of years. They've got the wind tunnel online. And you talked about it with Jesse. I mean, it's tough to call them the best driver lineup when Max Verstappen exists. I think wherever Max is right now, that's the best driver lineup. But and George and Lewis are amazing, and Carlos and Charles. If Charles can get his confidence back, I think he's going to be great again too. But what's interesting about Lando and Oscar is, it's not just one driver that's up there. It's not like Lando in second and Oscar in seventh. It's 2-3. Mm-hmm. They're right there. And they're playing the team game too, which is cool. Like that's neat to see. You got to do that when you're trying to catch. I think they're trying to catch Mercedes and Ferrari. That's what I think they're going for. And if they keep racing like they are, they might get a little closer. I don't know if they're going to catch them, but could be good. I feel like the thing with McLaren has got to be, can they keep the good vibes going? Can they keep both drivers in it for the team? Because that's really, really hard to do in Formula One. Oscar right now, he doesn't need to beat Lando. If he does, that's great. But it's not like, oh, my career and my legacy hinge on this. And next year, probably the same. But by year 3, if he's not beating Lando, then he's going to be pissed. And if he is beating Lando, then Lando's going to be pissed. And I think we're setting ourselves up here for a pretty serious battle between the two of them in a couple of years.
Yeah,
especially if the car is really good, right?
I think Zach's going to have his handful with two extremely competitive drivers.
I think that's a problem he'd prefer to have rather than having,
I don't think he's going to want what's coming, buddy.
Oh, no, you don't think so?
I don't think so, dude.
Would it be, okay, but would it be worse than Fernando Alonso and knowing you're going to lose him? And then, poor Stoffel Van Dorn, who, is a good driver, but they had a terrible car. Car back then. Yeah. I think he'd rather have, that's a good problem to have in comparison.
Yes. Okay. So it's all about management, right? When it comes to really talented drivers, you look at Oscar Piastri. I wasn't sold on Oscar Piastri and what McLaren went through in the battle with Alpine to get him. I wasn't sold on the fact that, is it worth it? Is this driver worth what you're doing right now? I don't think they knew that either. He has come in and kicked a lot of ass, man. Like qualifying P2 in Suzuka on a track he's never been to, a driver's track, a big commitment racetrack, not put a wheel wrong. He was remarkable all weekend, and also getting the new update for this track as well, which is also another thing he's got to learn. I think that this driver lineup is going to be one of the strongest on the grid next season. All Piastri needs to do is figure out how to keep tires alive on high deg situations, and he's good to go. Like, his learning curve, Adam, has been tremendous. He hasn't put a wheel wrong. And I think at the same time, you can see just how disappointed he is at the end of races when he's not really, really competitive. Like, we're talking pushing for wins or pushing for P2s. Like, he's the first rookie to get a podium since, I think it was Lance Stroll, Azerbaijan Grand Prix 2017.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah, he's been unbelievable.
Yeah. Well, and okay, so compare and contrast, Lando Norris today became the highest point scoring driver ever to not have a win. So it's him, and then it's Nico Hülkenberg, and then I think Romain Grosjean. And he's got Romain beat by, I think, 200 points already. Lando's got to get that first W, and it's not his fault that he hasn't. I think he would have had it this year. He would have had it in the last couple races if it wasn't for Max.
Yeah.
But they got to get him. They got to get him a car that's going to beat Red Bull. Like, listen, everybody's mad at Red Bull for being so good, or they want the FIA to step in. Here's who I'm mad at: the other 9 teams on the grid. How can you guys are supposed to be the pinnacle of motorsport. How can you let one team run away with it like this? And they got to be thinking that too. That, down, at all the factories, the McLaren factory, the Aston Martin factory, Mercedes is just frothing right now. Just so angry that they're not winning. I feel like this is going to be, it sets the stage for an exciting season. My question to you though is McLaren's on on a hot streak. They don't have the proven systems that Red Bull does. Can they actually improve this car and catch Red Bull by the beginning of next season?
I think so. I think we've seen it. I think we'll look at the data and look at where they started at the beginning of the season to where they are now. I mean, they've made up well over a second of performance within a season.
Yeah.
like in a season, dude, which is, like I said at the beginning, I've never seen anything like that before. It's really remarkable what they are doing. Everybody needs to know that. And that's why I think when we get into next season, I don't think Red Bull has this massive advantage. They will start with an advantage, no question about it. But I don't think it's going to be as big. And I also think that there's going to be teams that are going to be able to catch up to Red Bull by mid-season next year. Maybe not really close the gap completely, but I still think it's going to be way closer than what it is now. I mean, McLaren's been working on the 2024 car already. I mean, it's already good. I mean, obviously Red Bull got a head start with all of that, but McLaren's not far behind them in that regards as well, when they were able to have sort of 2 wind tunnels going at once. I just think that their driver lineup is what's really going to push them across the line, really push this team forward. When you have 2 really talented drivers like this who have sort of similar driving styles, and you push them forward and you push the team forward, and that's what they are doing. That's why we've also seen these huge jumps in performance. It's also because of the drivers as well, pushing the team and really maximizing everything that they're given. And that's why I think this is just such a strong driver lineup, like the Mercedes driver lineup, like what we're starting to see with Ferrari's driver lineup. It's just really, really strong. I'm excited for next year for them. I'm excited for the rest of the season for them. But yeah, it's I just can't say, there's so many good things to say, but there is no faults with them just yet. There's just nothing I can see.
Oh, it's nice, isn't it?
Yeah, if you're a fan, yeah, for sure. I mean, if you're a McLaren fan, if you're a Lando or Oscar fan, it's exciting times for sure. I mean, even they're just 49 points behind Aston Martin in the Constructors' Championship. I mean, Aston Martin's currently P4. They were P2.
Yep. And
I think they're definitely going to be coming for that P4 spot.
Wow. I'm hoping they can catch a P3. If they keep doing this, they're mathematically not completely out of it. So hopefully we'll see. I got to ask you, because everybody's talking about it, this Pierre Gasly, Esteban Ocon stuff. So there's a clip floating around the internet, and it's the last lap of the race, and Esteban is given the green light to pass Pierre, and Pierre is being made to slow down, right? Now, what is the reasoning for this? People are upset about it. Pierre Gasly is one of the most loved drivers out there. Why did they do this to Pierre? Is mostly the question that we're getting online. Why do this to our little boy?
Yeah, I think Esteban had let Pierre go by a little bit earlier before they swapped again. So they had swapped to allow Pierre to try and catch up to, I believe it was Alonso, who was running P8 towards the end of the race. And Gasly was on fresher tires. So I think the question is that could Gasly have caught and passed Esteban regardless of Esteban swapping? It's kind of like, I think for Pierre, that's where his frustrations come, because towards the end of this race, he's told to let Esteban go by, and Gasly sounds surprised by that on the radio. Like his radio call was like, it was extremely heated with his engineer and with the team, and the engineer back to him. And there was also sounding like a bit of confusion in there as well, which is
the engineer didn't even seem to want to relay the message. Like,
well, it's weird. Like the engineer even sounded a little confused by making the ask as well, a tiny bit. And so at the checkered flag, Gasly lets Ocon go by, so they swap to P9, P10. So Ocon takes P9 and Gasly falls back to P10, and he is livid in the car, dude. I had never seen a driver so upset.
I know. He's
inside a race car. Like, he was like pissed for the entire cooldown lap. I've never seen a driver like thrashing inside of a race car before. Like, that's how upset Gasly was by doing all that. And I don't think it has anything to do with the driver's past, like, because they have a rocky past. I don't think it has anything to do with that. I think it has everything to do with the fact that I think Gasly was pretty much like, I was gonna pass and catch this guy anyways, like regardless of whether you swapped us or you didn't, like, because I was on the fresher tires, and he was on the fresher tires. I think that's what his problem was. I mean, but at the end of the day, as a driver, for like Esteban Ocon, like, he did do the right thing. When he's told to swap, he swaps. I mean, that's what you do, but the courtesy is you swap them back. Right. And that's been the game in Formula One and in racing for a long time. And so
if you're Gasly, is it on you for not passing the guy in front of you and taking that option off the table?
The only thing is like, I think Alonso was like 6 or 7 seconds ahead.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't like
that Alpine car is not very good.
Yeah, and it wasn't like he was taking huge chunks out of like Alonso's delta. Like, it wasn't like he was clawing back all of this, performance. But one of the things, it's just the confusion of it. If you're going to swap, like, let them know you're going to swap, but if you can't catch them, we're going to swap it back.
Right.
And I think that's where that disconnect of communication happens behind the scenes with the team.
Yeah.
There wasn't that conversation. That didn't take place like it should have, it sounds like. And then, Bruno Famine coming out and defending the scenario and then telling everybody, hey, we're going to talk about it behind the scenes. It's like, I mean, come on, Alpine, like,
yeah,
you gotta be on the same page. And look, I get it. Behind the scenes, you have so much restructuring that you've just done. Whether it was the right restructuring remains to be seen. But you still have to let the drivers know that if you're going to do something like that, you gotta let them know that these are the rules that we're playing by today. Whether they did or they didn't, that's the question, I think. And I think that's why Gasly's just so upset.
Yeah.
Those are my thoughts on it.
And it's more chaos at Alpine. Like, they just can't get out of their own way. That was a really competitive car last year, and they are not patient enough to make it happen. And until the racing team isn't run by the corporation, you can be owned by the corporation, but you can't have a board making decisions like this. They're going to continue to make bad calls like they did with Otmar, I think. And their 3-year plan that they had is gone now. So what do you do? It's a shame, because that, Renault as a brand is such a huge name in Formula Series. And at one point they were the power unit for 3 or 4 different cars on the grid. And it just goes to show that no one trusts the power unit anymore. They're not making any money that way. Their drivers are French. That's fantastic. Like, really cool. They got 2 really solid drivers who in a good car would perform very well. It's crazy that, where McLaren was at the beginning of this year, that they're now like almost 100 points up on Alpine too.
Yeah.
Crazy.
That's wild, eh?
Yeah.
Like, absolutely wild. And like, they do want to try and get the FIA and the teams to allow them to open up their engine so they can make some tweaks to it to bump up the horsepower a bit, because they feel that they are down on horsepower with this engine. I don't know how easy that's going to be. I mean, because essentially the engines are sealed now. There's not much you can do with them until 2026. We get a new set of engine regs. The only cause for a team to open up the engines is if there are reliability issues, and currently it doesn't appear there are any, unless they can find a argument to be made that the reliability issues coincide with the lack of horsepower, and that's why they can't put the horsepower up, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's going to be really interesting at that team for next season as well. And then just to search for a team principal, right? I mean, Bruno Famin being the interim at the moment, whether or not he's going to be the full-time, again, that remains to be seen as well. It'll be interesting to see who they try and get. I mean, do they go after Mattia Binotto? But again, I don't think he wants to go and answer to the powers that be that are above him, right? I think he's already done that at Ferrari. It didn't go well for him, and I don't think he wants to go back to a situation like that. But
no. I mean, and how bad does Mattia need Formula One? Like, somebody will come knocking eventually, right?
Yeah, that's a good question too, right? Like, he was in it for so long, and now the fact that he's gotten out of it, and it's been, it will be a year in January, that he will have been removed from Formula One. It's the question of whether or not does he really want to come back. I'm sure he's got enough money to retire. He's got his vineyards. I mean, I think he's probably pretty much good to go, right? It's like, would he want to take on another challenge like that?
Yeah.
And then again, he's probably the most current team principal, right, Adam? So it's kind of
if I was Alpine, I'd want him.
Yeah, exactly.
I'd want him. But, the great thing is, if you're Mattia, at that point, you can demand a different corporate structure. You can say, I'm just not going to come unless you guys make these assurances or change these structures, because it's not going to work with a race team, as you've just seen.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And I don't know. I mean, I don't know if he'd have the power to do that, but he should ask. And then his other way in would be with one of the other the teams that are struggling a little bit. That Haas, or not that Gunther's going anywhere, but AlphaTauri or I don't know what has AlphaTauri have they made a call on who they're going to bring in? They have. Okay.
Yep. Laurent Mekies from Ferrari is going to be taking over for France Toss for next year. Laurent will, I believe he starts in either November or January. I can't remember what the exact date is, but they put him on a bit of a gardening leave at the moment, and he'll come over and he'll take over that team. Good time for him to take over AlphaTauri as well. But, leaving Ferrari, it's a decision that he ended up making. Whether or not it was the right or the wrong one remains to be seen, and we'll see what happens there. But for Ferrari, Charles Leclerc finishing, in the points, obviously P4, and then you had Carlos Sainz P6. Tough. I mean, for Ferrari to do so well in Singapore, and then they come to Japan, and Carlos Sainz goes the wrong way in terms of setup for this weekend, and then has to revert back to a different type of setting, kind of threw a wrench into his plans. It, harkens back to what I had said on this podcast last week about, Carlos in the summer break, coming out of that, him and his engineer basically agreeing that, they have to not put a foot wrong in free practice 1, 2, 3, have a clean weekend, put the weekend together for him to have success. That's one of those things where it's like, that's not you being able to have that clean weekend if you're going one way in a direction of setup and then having to come back and revert. So tough one for Carlos, but for Charles, this has got to be a confidence booster. Out qualifies his teammate for the first time in like 4 races. Yeah.
And he definitely considers himself the lead driver, right? So if he wants to be the lead driver, well, the other guy got to win this year, and he's regularly challenging you in qualifying. I don't know what their qualifying splits are, but I know I think they're even.
They're pretty close, yeah.
Pretty close. So Charles got to show that he can actually be the guy that Ferrari thought he could be. And part of being a great driver is taking a car that's pretty good and making it great. And you look at what Lando and Oscar have done. Now, the McLaren car is very, very good. But there were weekends here, like you mentioned, where it was terrible in slow corners, and they still managed to do something with it. Charles got to do that. He can't, and I think this is part of the maturing process, is the car is what it is. When you get the car, you can give feedback on the car, but the reality is that weekend it's not changing. So what are you going to do about it? And you look at the way Lewis Hamilton handles that Mercedes. which he still doesn't love and still manages. Like everybody's like, well, after last season, George might be the guy. Look at what Lewis has done this year with a Mercedes that he doesn't even like. I think Charles got to work in that direction, and Ferrari obviously has to move their way up, but they got to be, everybody writes them off because when Ferrari isn't winning, it's considered a disappointment, but they got to be like a dark horse challenger to be one of the best cars next year. They have to be.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think they've made some pretty impressive steps this season, considering, where they did start. It was pretty brutal. The Ferraris actually rebounded quite nicely, just coming to grips with a challenging car, especially in race trim, where the DEG on this car is extremely high. And so both drivers having to really learn and figure out how that all works. I think Charles had a really nice race. Actually, he had a good weekend in general. I think personally, it's probably one of his best weekends he's had since probably Spa. Maybe this is the confidence that he needs to finish off strong in the season. He's behind his teammate right now in the driver standings. I think at the end of the day, though, if you're Ferrari, you have to be happy with having two cars in the points. Maybe not P4, P6, but yeah. I mean, it's still a good result, I think, for the team, considering this isn't really a track that ultimately suits their car and what it does. And I think they're going to have more successes as the season sort of rolls along. You mentioned Mercedes there, that car on a knife's edge all the time. And, you talk to Lewis Hamilton about this, and that's exactly what, he'll tell you. They're just not running enough downforce on that car. It's clear. I mean, McLaren may be the quicker team than them now at the same time. And it's funny, like watching, well, it's not funny, but like it's interesting watching Hamilton and George Russell battle it out in this race.
George, what did you think of George at the end saying, if I stay ahead of Lewis, I'll let him pass on the last lap, but I'll give him it's just, no, he didn't like that. I mean, I like the way he thinks, right? He's creative.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he's pushing the team, right? Which he should do. But George is the one who put himself in the one-stop strategy, right? You got to deal with it, man. Lewis is going to be faster. He's on the he's on the fresher tires. He's coming to get you. He's going to take it. And what are you going to do, right? You can't, like Carlos had so much closing pace. I mean, I think Ferrari got that strategy just a tiny bit wrong as well on Carlos's side, where he probably could have finished even higher than where he did. I think, Lewis was coming for that spot regardless, and you can't just keep him behind with Carlos also being the faster driver as well in that situation, because Carlos, I think, had better pace than the Mercedes did.
Yep.
Towards the end and closing stages of this race. But what are you going to do? You got to let him by, man. Like, you have to swap. And then I think Hamilton could have maybe let up a little sooner to give George the DRS, but I still don't think at the end of the day by giving George the DRS was enough.
And when Carlos is racing too well right now, too. Yeah. Like, he's pretty confident. I wondered, too, because it was 2 or 3 laps that they were stuck in that position. And I wondered if they wasted time not getting Lewis past, letting Carlos catch up and letting Charles get away, right? Like, Lewis ultimately didn't have a chance at getting Charles, but if you were going to have an outside chance, I don't think lap 49 with him 5 seconds ahead of you is the way to go. It was probably lap 46 where you can say, okay, mathematically, can we do this? Can we shave, 0.7 of a second off for the next 4 or 5 laps and then be in contention? And I just didn't see it seemed like Mercedes didn't know what to do, if I'm being honest. And
I think,
and you got it. I mean, with George's tire strategy, you should have let Lewis go right away, because then there's no Carlos in the area. It was a very risky switch that they made. They did it, but imagine it had gone wrong. Imagine Carlos passes them both, which easily could have happened. Oh, yeah.
I mean, I think I think George pitted around lap 24, and that's when he slapped on the hards, and then that's what he ran for the rest of the race. And that's where I question, dude, why would you? No one else is doing that. Why would you think that that's a great option? And then you have Hamilton and Leclerc basically pitting on the same lap, jumping onto fresh hards as well. And then you have Carlos Sainz was about 4 laps later, around lap 38. I think Hamilton, Leclerc are around 34 when they pitted. And so Sainz has fresher rubber than both of them. So I think if that pit stop gets done a little bit differently for Carlos, then like I said, we're probably talking about a different spot for him.
Mm-hmm.
But I think with Mercedes, just, obviously Toto Wolff not being there this weekend. And what was a quote that Ted used was it Ted or was it someone from Sky Sports said, quote, "When the wolf is away, the boys will play."
That's right. I like that. I thought that was funny.
Actually pretty good. That's good. I like it too. But like he's, they are right, because it's like these two were really, George and Lewis were really at each other this race.
Yeah.
I don't even think they spoke to each other when they got into Park Fermé. Like I think I saw an onboard Lewis, or was it George's onboard camera when he pulled into Park Fermé, jumps out of the car and just completely just goes to cool off. Like I think for George, that was a really heated race for him, and for Lewis, like I think for George, he's got to understand as well that Lewis is actually fighting for like P2 in this championship.
Yes, and you got to support that. You have to support that.
I think so. Yeah,
man. It's Max, we already know he's going to win the Drivers' Championship, but what a moral victory if Lewis gets ahead of Sergio.
That's huge.
If that happens, that is going to be huge. And it would be great for the factory, great for everybody that works at Mercedes if that happens. George has got to help make that happen.
I agree with you. I think like for Hamilton just now being about 30, he's around 33 points behind Sergio in the driver standings for P2. Him. But Adam, like coming out of the summer break, that's all that Hamilton was talking about, was running after Sergio and taking second place away from him.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And you can see it. He wants it. He's so much more focused than he was last year too.
Did you see Hamilton's move on Alonso into 130R?
I did.
Oh my God, I had to close my eyes.
It's spicy. Those two, man, they seem to have developed, like I know they hated each other for a while. They seem to have developed a grudging respect, almost like a sense of humor. Like, this is kind of stupid that we're still here in our 40s. And, it's difficult to get as fired up in your late 30s about something like that. I think, you're still passionate, but you realize like, I'm not going to crap all over the guy. There is they are wild with each other. They race each other hard, and you can tell the way they race each other is different than anybody else, right?
I think so.
Yeah, because it's still like I still think Fernando's pissed that he didn't win.
That 2007 McLaren season with those two together.
Yeah. Oh, it's crazy. And it's been a rivalry ever since, and it's still fun.
One of the things that Alonso has talked about between the two of them was that just how young both of them were at the time with that relationship, and it not being handled well by the team itself, actually not managing both of them at the same time. Because within a team, like you do need the team to manage a driver's relationship too. I mean, that's just it's part of the game, right? If you want to have if you want to have a good environment for everybody to work in, you need to make sure that the drivers are working well together. Yeah. Alonso gave him enough room in the 130R, man, but if he doesn't, like, I close my eyes. Like, it's just, it was incredible pass by Lewis. I think actually Leclerc's pass on George Russell was also a good one that comes to mind in this race as well. Yeah. Hamilton's post-race comment where he said the next 6 months have to be the greatest 6 months in development that we've ever had is interesting.
Well, it's a challenge. Okay, guys, time to pick it up. Yep. This is now 18 months away from our last Drivers' Championship. Where have we gotten since then? I don't blame him. He's out to win.
That's a lot of like pressure to really put on your team from him to say that into the media, because I think behind the scenes he's been very forceful and vocal for quite a while now about what he wants from the car, where he wants it to go. And I think, we are seeing that play out now because of what he's had to do behind the scenes earlier in the year.
Yes. Yeah.
And it kind of sounds like, he's been telling the team what he wants and what the direction that they need to go in for them to have success for quite a while now.
Well, it seems to me that he feels that they didn't listen to him last year.
Kind of sounds that way. I mean, he hasn't came out and said that, but I get. And I
can understand why a team wouldn't listen to a driver. I get it.
Yeah.
But ultimately, have they won?
Well, we won in Brazil last year.
George, yeah.
But still,
have they won?
No. I mean, this season, the beginning was a disaster with that car. So,
yeah. Oh yeah, no. Listen, man. I get why a team would be like, listen, we know a lot more about engineering than the driver knows about engineering,
for sure.
But this is Lewis Hamilton. You might want to start to listen to him. And George is saying the same thing. It's not like Lewis is alone here. George hates it just as much.
Yes, for sure. Aston Martin.
Yes,
it has been a very difficult back end of this season for them. It's almost like they're just starting to go a bit backwards now. I mean, Alonso finishing P8. I think that's everything that the car had. I don't think it could have gone any higher than that, no matter what type of strategy the team tried to do. I mean, obviously, Alonso's comments, he was unhappy on the radio telling the team that they threw him to the lions. He did clarify, though, that he was frustrated because he was losing the cars that were in front of him, even with DRS. Obviously, the AMR 23 really struggles with straight line speed. He was upset that the team boxed him so early in the opening stint as well. But I think at the end of the day, the team's trying to be aggressive with strategy because I think they know where they're eventually going to cycle out anyway. So why not try to do something a little bit different, even if that puts you back into the same spot? And eventually it did anyways. So I think the team being aggressive with strategy to force a few others in front of them to box early like they did, try to get that undercut because it's so powerful in Suzuka. I mean, they tried. It didn't pan out the way they wanted it to, but regardless, they ended up finishing where they thought they were going to finish anyways. And I think it's been eye-opening to see how much they've dropped back. I would say after Canadian Grand Prix.
Fernando's comments to me, to the engineer that were so widely publicized, are less about where they pitted, and I think more about the frustration of the lack of the progress of the car. He was talking about at the beginning of the season, it was the best car he's ever driven, right? And and he was harmonious. And listen, as long as you're winning, it's going to be a harmonious relationship with Fernando Alonso. But they got him so that when they weren't winning, he could provide the proper feedback and push them to win. The problem is sometimes the way Fernando in the past has delivered that has alienated people. We know that, right? He's a frustrating guy for some teams to deal with. But if you want true greatness, he wants true greatness. He's going to tell you exactly how he feels. So, it's good for them that they finished where they did. It's a bummer for Stroll that the wing just fell apart on him. It's not, man, what a disaster, nightmare season for him. I feel bad for him because so much of it, getting hit by a car and breaking both your wrists and all the other things that went into it.
Fell off
the bike, excuse me. But all the same, all the things that happened to him, it's man, this is just toss this season in the garbage. Go back at it next year. Who cares? They know what he's like in a sim. They know what he probably compares to with Fernando on this stuff. Today's not even his fault. Forget it. Just move on and hopefully finish strong this year because they do still have a fight. They got a fight with McLaren for fourth place now, which is a shame.
I mean, the luck that Lance has had this season, I mean, not letting him all completely off the hook. He's made mistakes. The team has made mistakes. But at the same time, the luck is just, man, imagine if that rear wing had to come off in this race before the team caught it.
Oh boy. Yeah, that's a problem. That's
you could see on problem. You could see on the garage shot, the wing literally, he's just touching it, and the wings literally I'm oh my God.
That could have been a disaster.
If that had it came off, oh man, that's
crazy. Never seen it.
Massive shunt for sure. Yeah, it's been a tough season for him. Hopefully things start to turn around a bit more in his favor. We talked about Liam Lawson, Yuki Tsunoda, the Alfa Romeo of Zhou Guanyu. Tough start to the race.
Yeah.
Nico Hulkenberg and Kevin Magnussen finishing P14, P15 in the Haas. That Haas is going to change by the time we get to the U.S. Grand Prix. It's going to be a big upgrade. It's going to look a lot different. The Williams team.
Oh,
Adam.
Oh,
holy hell. You want to talk about another team in driver pairing that's had
tough goes.
They're tough goes.
So in my grid rival, I have Verstappen, Piastri, Lando, but I also have both Williams drivers because Albon has been just floating my team. Like, he's been amazing, the progressions he's made, and Logan Sargeant's just super cheap on grid rival. So I just, it's like, oh, how much money can I lose on a guy that consistently finishes 15th, right? It's sort of, I think that Albon, it seems like it was just, they have a fast car. So this seemed like a circuit that would be good for them. But I think he got damage in the first.
Yeah, he got contact in the opening.
Yeah.
And he went up in the air, where I was he went this way actually in the start finish straightaway. And I was like, my God, if that had have gone just a couple more inches,
it's a problem.
That would have been a massive incident. But
yeah. So I'm hoping for, listen, Logan Sargeant, looking like he's going to be around next year. I hope to just see improvements there. I think that, the mistake he made in qualifying on Saturday was driver error, and he's leading the championship in most money spent on cars destroyed. So it's over $2 million in damages, I think, so far. He's got to clean that up. But Albon, I have no worries about it. And I think James Vowell's got that team headed in the right direction for the first time in a decade. It's so nice to see.
For that crash for Logan, just getting a snap of oversteer just coming in, which is a weird spot anyways to get a snap like that anyways. It was a weird incident. It reminded me a lot of Robert Kubica's back in 2019 Suzuka. But just kept his boot in it. He just, Sargeant just kept his foot in it. And it was just I can understand why he did, because that lap would have been Q2, no problem. He was on one for sure. Mm-hmm. And he was actually, cause I was following both of their quali times on the tracker, and they were right on pace with each other. Him and Sargeant, Albon and Sargeant were during that Q1. And if he had to finish that lap off, I can understand why he kept his foot in it. He was going for it. I get it. Mm-hmm. But that grass is right there, man. And it's kind of what do you do at that moment? You take your foot out of it and concede the lap.
I guess. I think
either way, it would have been a difficult outcome for him.
Yeah.
And in the race, the incident that he had in the race, I was just what are you doing? That's
Again, confidence.
That again is one of those things where it's just overdriving a bit, not really thinking too much. But I think for Logan, definitely has been a learning season for sure. I could see Williams sticking with him though for next season. And then everyone's well, why not put Liam Lawson? There's so many things that go into that.
Yeah.
I do feel that Logan is a really good racing driver, and people are going to make fun of him online and whatever. But I've known him for a long, for quite a while now. That's he is a really good driver, man. Just losing out at that F3 championship to Oscar Piastri, and then again at the same time, not knowing whether or not you're going to race the next year, and then coming back and performing well again, and performing when you don't even know what your future looks like. You have no idea.
Yep.
And so I think for a driver like Logan, I think you give him another year. I think you do that. Just give him that second year, see what happens. If it's not happening, then obviously you go your separate ways and you bring somebody else in. But at the same time, I think if you're James Vowles, you're coming into Williams, It's your first team principal job. You want to put your stamp on this thing. I understand that these aren't the two drivers that you've chosen, but
you got a good one.
One's incredible, is at the top of his game right now, and the other one is from your driver pipeline, which you're trying to build. Mm-hmm. I don't think you can just go and scrap your pipeline like that.
Yeah, agreed. So, well, we'll see what happens with Williams coming up, but I do feel I feel good about Williams. I feel like they're in a good spot, and I would like to see them. I would like to see them get close to Alpine in points. And I know it's really going to be up to Albon to do that, but I'd like to see them do it.
Yeah, I agree. We've pretty much covered everybody, so let's head on over to the debrief, and we'll take your questions from there. Shout out to @WolfCola47 because they actually had asked us about the Gasly Perez situation. Mm-hmm. So shout out to them. From @the Ty Jaeger. Sorry if I keep pronouncing your name wrong, dude. I'm not the greatest with names. Okay,
it's okay. There's nothing wrong with that.
My apologies. Your best. Question is, will we have any fights for the race win again this season? If so, which circuit?
That's a question, Tim.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think Qatar is going to be interesting. Mm-hmm. I think like a track like Vegas will also be interesting, only because of the temperature. We don't know like how cold it's going to be there, and that seems to really play havoc with a lot of the teams, especially running the ride height where they have to sort of run it with these street circuits. And we've seen what happens now with Red Bull when you combine that tire temperature sort of window for some races, but then you look at the ride height level as well on a track that we're not sure if it's going to be bumpy or not either. Mm-hmm. I mean, they are repaving it, but we'll have to wait and see. And I think Brazil, I think Brazil's going to throw up a good race.
Yeah,
I mean, they always do, but like I honestly think like that could be also a race where we could see something where we see a challenge. So thanks very much for your question there, Ty. I really appreciate that. From the pacifist hockey fan.
Okay.
What weird way is Max going to win the championship this year? It can't be normal. There has to be a penalty or some weird rule implemented.
He's going to win it in the sprint next Saturday. Or no, not next Saturday, but the following.
Are you calling it here?
Yeah, he's winning it in the sprint. That's why it's weird. He won't win it in the race. He'll win it in the sprint. It'll happen.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I don't think like I don't think like it would be. I want to see him win it on a Sunday. Mm-hmm. I don't want to see a Saturday sprint race champion.
Well, I think you're about to.
I don't, but you know what I mean, though, Adam. I wasn't a huge fan of the sprint race thing when they first sort of brought it up, and now I'm like, it's okay. I don't mind it. I want them to sort of change the way the sprint works within a weekend. I actually don't really like that it's sort of its own standalone thing. I like that they actually set the grid with that, or it reminds me back of my karting days when you have your heats to set the race grid, and I actually like that because getting these cars closer together, which they are starting to become. I mean, we get some pretty good entertainment out of that. I don't know, Adam. I just want to see him winning on a Sunday and whatever. Okay.
Yeah, I get you. I completely get you.
From Fiona, how short is Sergio Perez's leash, Checo's leash at this point?
Man, Tim, another question for you. It can't be that short. I think he's okay. Right?
I think he's, I think he's okay. I don't necessarily see them moving him out of the team this season. Maybe not even next. I can see him finishing out the contract there. But again, like the performance thing. So if we start to see something similar starting to happen, 6 races into next season, then I think there's probably going to be some questions that need to be answered. And whether or not Sergio is there at that point, we'll wait and see. But Northern Neighbor asks, Liam Lawson in 2024, question mark, Super Formula, question mark, F1 Reserve, again, question mark, would it even be worth it if Williams' second seat is available? Question mark.
So it's a yes, yes, and a no.
Woo!
Right?
Well, Liam Lawson in 2024. So like for the Super Formula thing, he could possibly win that championship. He's second in the driver standings, if I'm not mistaken, in that championship. So he still has a shot at winning it. I think Red Bull want him to win that. And then next season, no chance he's back in Super Formula because he's going to be on, F1 test and reserve driver duty, probably simulator work, a ton of it as well, with them. And I think that's going to be his future in 2024. Again, like we were talking about, I don't think Williams tries to go after him. I just don't see it, but I mean, who knows? We'll wait and see what happens on that end. But the statement that I did get on, I believe it was Friday, from the team was that that's exactly where he's going to be for next season, is going to be that test and reserve driver for both teams. So, I mean, we'll see what happens. Adam, this has been a ton of fun, man.
Yeah, it's been great, man. It's always fun to be on this show. I'm excited. I'm bummed that we didn't get a Ferrari victory again. So I think Jesse got a banger episode last week because of it. But listen, if it's gonna happen, I'm glad McLaren are 2-3. Okay.
Adam, let everybody know where they can find you, and also what you guys have got going on the STP.
Well, you can find me on the STP. You can find me on Agent Provocateur with Alan Walsh, Adam Wylde on Twitter, Adam Wylde on Instagram. And what do we have coming up? I think, honestly, Tim, right now in hockey, it's overreaction season. So we're going to see the Leafs and the Senators, take each other on in the next week or so in preseason. I know the Senators are going to dress like their top line, and Senators fans have just been crazy this year in terms of they're so excited, and they're taking shots at the Canadians and taking shots at Leaf fans. And it's going to be a really, really fun thing. And I think the Battle of Ontario is going to start up again this year for real, which I'm excited about. And I'm kind of pumped to see some of the new guys come in. And I think this is going to be this year. It's going to be one of the best new Leaf versions we've seen in a long, long time. I'm very excited for this.
I've been watching a lot of Agent Provocateur lately. Great podcast, man. Where did you guys get the name?
That's Alan. Alan. I think Alan did a radio hit in Ottawa for TSN up there, TSN 1200, and they used to call him Agent Provocateur. So he asked the host, he's like, "Can I use that for my pod?" And the guy was like, "Yeah, no problem." And that's how it came to be. So pretty cool, huh?
Yeah, you guys just had Paul Bissonnette on.
Yeah.
It was good. I watched the whole thing.
Oh, I'm glad. Well, I'm glad that it was a heck of a story, and I think obviously, Mike Babcock is about as radioactive as it gets in hockey, and I was surprised that they hired him in the first place. But so for this all to transpire, although you could never have predicted that this was the thing that was going to bring him down, it felt like something was going to come eventually.
I actually, I don't know if Paul Bissonnette would ever remember this, but I think it was, I'm trying to remember what the year was. It might have been 2018. He was doing something with the Arizona Coyotes.
Yeah, I think he's been radio for them for a long time.
Yeah, he was doing something, and I was in LA working an event, and I was heading into the last day of this event, and I was staying at this hotel at this coffee shop underneath it. It was really good. But anyways, I'd gone out the night before. I don't go out too much, but I went out the night before, it was the last night of us being in LA, right? And so I had to dress up for this event or whatever, and it's early morning, and I'm a little, and my tie's all jacked up, and I'm down there trying to get coffee, and this guy taps me on the shoulder, he's like, "Hey, bud," he's like, "Let me fix your collar here. You're all whatever." I turn around and it's Paul Bissonnette. He's fixing my collar.
That's amazing. That is a funny story.
Yeah, it was a long time ago, man. And I got my coffee, and he got his stuff and left, and I was just like, "Oh my god!" Because I knew who he was, right?
Yeah, sure.
I knew exactly who he was. Yeah. It was cool, man. It was Yeah, he was a nice guy.
Cool.
He was a nice guy. It was cool. Yeah. So, anyways, I watched that episode. It was a really good episode, Adam. It's really good.
Oh, I'm glad to hear it. Thank you. Again, all
show.
Alan on that one. I'm just a passenger. I am the Sergio Perez to his Max Verstappen.
Well, buddy, thanks again for taking the time to do this. Really appreciate it. If you want more Nailing the Apex, you can get it wherever you get your podcasts. You can also watch us on YouTube as well. You can follow me on social media at Tim Hauraney. We will be back later this week with more Nailing the Apex. So we'll talk to you all later.